Timer. First off, I want to thank everybody for being here. Something that's interesting about the blockchain community, I was just at 3 conferences in New York, and so many people in the community started with why, with this new decentralized, distributed, kind of ground-up community thing. So I think it's awesome that you all are here supporting this. Also, thank you, Caleb, and Bitcoin.com for supporting us and giving us free drinks. A bit on me before I talk about universal basic income. My name is Reese Lindmark. I went through Techstars Boulder in 2015 and do some Techstars pure mentorship, and also just recently went to an advisory role at my company in order to work more on blockchain for social good kind of things. I work in between blockchain and universal basic income and effective altruism and the attention economy. So that's kind of where I live in the world. And I kind of advise and work with various startups and companies and communities within the space, like GrantCoin and some other ones. So that's me, and now let's talk about universal basic income. So the first question is... Okay, great. So the first question is, why do we need it? Why are people like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg just last week or 2 weeks ago talked about this at his commencement address, advocating for something like universal basic income? And the reason is because I like to look at the past to understand the future. This is a graph from 1850 through now of different jobs in America. So in 1850, 50% of people were employed in farming. But then Industrial Revolution, Agricultural Revolution, those things made the case that a lot of those jobs went over and turned into blue-collar and white-collar jobs. That happened the last, 150 years, and we expect to see something similar with that, but with blue and white-collar jobs as a result of technological unemployment, essentially. So that is one way to understand it. Looking to the future, this is a graph where on the left side, these are professions. On the right side, this is the number of millions of workers in America that work for that thing. And so the black bar is the percentage of those people that will be automated in 2 decades. Yep, crazy. So retail salespersons, 4.5 million people, 90% automated. Self-driving trucks is another classic example up here, likely to be automated in the next 2 decades. So that is looking a little bit to the future, but why is it different this time, right? Because technology has always occurred. We have always made new things to make it better and more efficient for us to work. And so I think about it from kind of 4 different perspectives. 1 is the convergence of AI and automation plus blockchain. 2 is the speed at which it's happening this time. 3 is the alternatives to blue and white collar jobs. And 4 is this new nonlinear jump to abundance going forward. So what that looks like, essentially, let's talk about convergence first. And convergence of creative destruction externalities. So a creative destruction externality is essentially when technology gets better, and when you have the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, all those farming jobs, that creates job loss. So that's kind of like an externality job loss, similar to climate change, but from a job loss perspective. So we can look at this kind of system level view of these externalities through this thing called Loopy, which we're just going to exit this one. So this is a system-level view of these convergence of AI and automation and disintermediation in blockchain. So AI and automation essentially is going to, there's a positive feedback loop here between profit and automating things that leads to blue-collar job loss, which leads to political unrest. You have a similar thing in yellow here with blockchain and white-collar jobs. Blockchain is all about disintermediating the middleman. And so we see that here, and then there'll be a little bit, we see this education loop happening as well, which is blue-collar jobs being educated into white-collar jobs. That's one final part of this. So let's kind of click play to see this happen. As AI starts to happen, it creates blue-collar job loss, and as blue-collar job loss happens, it kind of turns into political unrest. Those people start to get educated into white-collar jobs. As that's happening as well, you have, in the near future, we'll have blockchain happening as well with white-collar job loss. And these loops are happening, these loops are happening, and both of these are kind of converging in the next couple decades onto things like more political unrest and job loss within society. So that is one part of this, is the convergence. The next part is how fast it's going to happen, which a lot of people don't quite understand. I was just at these 3 conferences last week, and Naval Ravikant had a great thing about history often repeats itself, but history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. I think this is going to be the primary difference in this situation, where agricultural revolution was slower than the industrial revolution is going to be slower than the blockchain and AI revolutions. So the speed at which it's going to happen is going to be intense. And then finally, the job alternative perspective is one where back in the day we could take farming jobs and turn them into blue collar or white collar jobs. But as you go from blue collar to white collar, after white collar jobs start to get automated, what happens next? And then the final concept here is of abundance. And this is one, this guy Albert Langer from Union Square Ventures talks about the world after capital and how the scarce resource for the past couple decades has been capital, essentially, money and factories and things of that variety. But he thinks that we're going to have a nonlinear jump, essentially, into a world where capital is no longer scarce, where the basic need of food way back in the day was scarce, and then it was land that was scarce, and then it was capital that was scarce, but now we're going to live in a world of abundance created by automation where we can kind of actually fund something like universal basic income. And then the one final thought here is around the great decoupling, which is essentially a way to think about income inequality over the last couple of years. And so what the great decoupling means is this, these are 4 economic indicators over the past kind of 50 years. You can see up through 1980, they kind of stay coupled together, are related to each other. But after this point, these 2, productivity and real GDP per capita, kind of go up, while these ones, median family income, aka the middle class, and private employment, aka jobs, start to get decoupled from it. So those are not increasing as other things have been increasing. So that decoupling, great decoupling, is another thing that we're seeing now. So this is all to say that we are living in a world that is a little bit more fragile in these next 2 decades. If anybody's read Taleb, he has this great book called Anti-Fragile. Anti-Fragile is a concept similar to resilience, where when change happens, you're actually better as a result of it. But we're not really optimized for that right now. We're optimized to get there not as smoothly as possible, but as quickly as possible. I love this quote from Wait But Why / Elon Musk that says...
It's actually Tim Urban.
It's true, his name is Tim Urban. But the unfortunate thing is that the human colossus, aka the human organism, the human network that we are now, isn't optimized to maximize the chances of a safe transition to the best possible Planet 4, aka the future. For the most possible humans, it's optimized to build Planet 4 in any way as possible, as quickly as possible. So, that is the world that we're going to encounter in the next 20 years. And it might be a little bit intense. Enter basic income, which is not a end-all answer, but is a good result that a lot of people are thinking about. So these are first some non-blockchain implementations of universal basic income. These are pilot projects that are happening around the world. There are 8 pilot programs happening right now. Y Combinator is doing one in Oakland for $2,000 a month. This effective altruist organization called Give Directly is doing one in rural Kenya for $30 a month because it costs less there. And then there are other things like Patreon, a Patreon universal basic income community, which I'm part of, where you take income through Patreon, which is like a subscription Kickstarter, and then because I'm aware of diminishing returns on happiness with money, I essentially cap my own income and give that money to these other universal basic income things. So these are some of the non-blockchain universal basic income things that are happening today. And we also have some blockchain projects. And I was talking with my friend about this recently, and she was like, well, why would you even do this on blockchain? And it's so aligned. The word just like universal is aligned with this new globalized, decentralized world where it shouldn't necessarily be connected to a nation state. So it's a global and decentralized UBI without the artificial borders of states. That's the concept going forward. We'll look at 3 different ones: grant, coin, unitary, and resilience. And as we look at them, 2 things to note. One is you have to have a verifiably unique identity, i.e. I can't be like, give me a UBI, also give me a UBI, pretending to be 2 different addresses. And then the...
Hello everyone. Unfortunately, the rest of my talk was not recorded correctly, so I'll give the rest of it here, and then we'll go back and listen to the Q&A portion at the end. So going where I left off, we were talking about 2 different ways of where the money can come from. The first is what's called helicopter money, where you can kind of imagine creating new money, injecting new money into the system, and then flying a helicopter around, or a digital cryptocurrency blockchain-based helicopter, and giving that money to anyone who says, I want some money. So that's way one, which is helicopter money, and that's the way that Grant Coin and Dunitaire work. And the second way is through self-imposed taxation, where you essentially, as people in the system, you create a tax on yourself to give money back to the system to increase the healthiness and resiliency of the system. So those are the two ways that money can come from. And let's dive into Grant Coin, which uses the helicopter money system. So Grant Coin, anyone can sign up and ask for helicopter money. And right now you have 2,700 people from about 100 different countries who have signed up. And they use a system called a kata for their unique identity. They have a quarterly distribution of $3.71, which doesn't seem like much in America, but remember that in rural Kenya, it's only $90 a quarter to have universal basic income out there. So it's not that close, but it's also not that far away, especially for people in developing countries to have a UBI. Right now it has a $25,000 market cap, which comes from a couple different things. First, it comes from speculators purchasing Grant Coin on exchanges. For someone that says, hey, I want to do good, and I think that the price might increase, they might purchase something like Grant Coin and create essentially demand for the supply that exists. The other way that it has a market cap is through donations to the Grant Coin Foundation. And in the Grant Coin Foundation, they spend about 80% of their donations buying back Grant Coin from the people that they've given it to. And they do that to sustain a price floor so that it kind of goes up and to the right just a little bit. And they make sure that happens by spending 80% of their donations on demand side Grant Coin. So it's not tax-based, but donation-based. And right now it is on a Peercoin fork, but it's moving to Ripple and Ethereum soon, as part of this bigger transition where Grant Coin is a proof of concept for this new Mana coin, which will be a more kind of wide-reaching and bigger vision UBI coin in the future. So that is Grant Coin, a version of helicopter money where anyone can sign up and get a quarterly distribution of Grant Coin. The second version of helicopter money is called Dunitaire and their G1 coin. And this recently had a production release in France in March, and they have about 150 members thus far. They verify their unique identity through something called the Web of Trust, where you start with a small group of people, and then that small group of people is in the Web of Trust. If you want to get in, you have to be certified by people in the Web of Trust. So right now they have about 200 people on the wait list who are essentially waiting for 5 certifications or verifications that those people are unique and should be part of the Web of Trust. It's built on a blockchain that distributes the mining among the members in an equal way so that you don't have kind of whale miners. And they do a daily distribution that is not the money of their G1 money is not accepted. It's not currently on exchanges, but it is accepted in restaurants in France currently. So you can pay for food with G1. You can also, vacation at this spot in Belgium and spend G1 coin there. And there's also kind of an eBay style marketplace where you can buy and sell goods and spend your G1 coin instead of traditional fiat currency in that marketplace. So that is how Dunitaire works. It is another helicopter system where you get into it through the Web of Trust. And right now you can't exchange it for fiat, but you can use it for goods and services. The third system that I want to talk about is called Resilience. And Resilience is tax-based, not helicopter money-based. And so what that means is it uses a value-added tax that is chosen by the producer. And what I mean by that is a value-added tax is where, let's say you're a company that makes furniture, you get some lumber, you take that lumber and turn it into some furniture, and not in America, but in a lot of other Western countries and developed countries, you will get a tax for essentially adding value to the lumber. You took the lumber and turned it into furniture, and you get taxed when you sell your furniture. So right now, that value-added tax is chosen by the government. But with something like Resilience, that value-added tax is chosen by the producer. And so you can imagine going to the consumer has this option of 2 different producers, one of whom has a 15% tax on themselves and one of whom has a 5% tax on themselves. And you can imagine it like buying organic foods where you say, even though it's more expensive to go to the person who self-taxes themselves 15%, I'm going to choose them because I think it's important to give money back to the system. So that's the way that Resilience works, is through this the value-added tax, the VAT, chosen by the producers. And right now, there's a proof of concept live on Ethereum where you can kind of hook any of your transactions into the resilience system, and a 2% transaction tax will be added to your transactions, and they go not to the full system, but rather just to the creator right now, to this guy Johan, as the proof of concept, where money goes directly to him right now. That is just the initial proof of concept, though, and later he hopes to implement a swarm redistribution, which is where the money, instead of just going to him, it goes back to all the people essentially that you've interacted with, that you've bought and sold goods with, and people that you've transacted with in the network. And later, expecting something like a tax EAM, which is kind of like a genetic tax code, where you can imagine people who are self-taxing themselves are kind of, those taxes are kind of mating in these interesting ways, and it's kind of an organic tax system rather than the centralized tax system that we have today. So that is resilience, and given those three systems, now let's think about what the future actually looks like. So the future, again, we're transitioning from scarce capital to scarce time, and in this initial transition period, I'd expect more non-nation state tax-based redistribution schemes, whether it's something like resilience or whether it's something like, my Patreon, where people are actively self-taxing themselves. And the real question with this is, how can we incentivize wealthier people to contribute? For someone that has a bunch of houses or has, tens of millions of dollars, how can we incentivize them to say, hey, you should self-tax yourself and redistribute that money back to the system? So that's during this initial transition period. And then later, I would expect something like the helicopter money system, this universal distribution, where people are getting lots and lots, where people are getting coins that are injected into the system. And when we see something like that, I would expect something that's called demurrage to occur. And what that is imagine it like the water cycle, where you send money out to everybody, and then the money kind of, if you don't spend it, it kind of evaporates back into the system. And so this is a way for, instead of money to have compounding returns, like a win more situation, where if you have money, you'll get more money. Instead, if you have lots of money and aren't spending it, then that money essentially goes back into the system. So that's the other thing to anticipate. And then the third thing that we predict is something called circles, which was presented by Martin Kopelman from Gnosis. And circles, the way that it works is, you can imagine, so it takes as a truth that from a game theoretical perspective, the financial incentives to create new coins mean that it could be the case that lots of people have their own personal coins. Getting in at the beginning of a coin is great, and so there's going to be more and more cryptocurrencies, and at the most extreme, you can imagine a cryptocurrency for every person. So for example, even on my Patreon, you get a Reese coin if you contribute to my Patreon, if you're a patron. So you can imagine a Reese coin and a U coin and what have you. And the way that Circles works is, if everybody has a bunch of coins, then those people can essentially transact in a one-to-one way and can agree that their coin equals everybody else's coin. And if that's true, then that's kind of a version of universal basic income implemented through personal coins. So that's something to expect in the future as well. But the real question in the future is, even if we have something like a universal basic income, where do people get meaning? People are so used to getting meaning from the job loop and from contributing at work. And if there's technological unemployment and automation, where will people who don't work every day but have an income, where will they derive meaning from their life? So that will be a big key question going forward. And finally, I want to ask the question of, what can you do? What is the call to action here? I think two things. There are two ways to contribute. First is supporting monetarily, something like Give Directly's basic income study, supporting someone like myself on Patreon, or giving money to someone like the Grant Coin Foundation. Those are all ways to support new universal basic income. And then secondarily, you can, if you don't want to monetarily support, you can support by purely discussing it and making it more in the ether of the blockchain space. And so what I mean by that is, first, you can be more aware of your diminishing returns on money with respect to happiness. If you're making $45,000 a year, additional money after that doesn't do that much for your happiness. And you have a huge opportunity to self-tax yourself and give that money for large global leverage that can increase happiness worldwide. So that's the first thing, is the connection between money and happiness. And the second thing is to be aware, for us in the technological space, to be aware of our creative destruction externalities, to say, hey, we're creating automation, we're creating AI, we're creating, blockchain-based disintermediation, and that's good in the long term, but in the short term, there's going to be a lot of job loss, and we need to be aware of that part of the system as well. So those are the two ways that you can support. And with that, I'll give it back to my old self at the meetup and let him talk and answer some questions. Great. Thanks so much. Bye.
Actually, you're probably loud enough.
Yeah. Hey, my name is Chris.
Hey, Chris, yeah, Chris.
Have you heard of Frycoin?
No.
So Frycoin was a demurrage coin made by Mark Friedenbach, who's one of the developers, and it was a demurrage currency. It basically gives money takes money from people who have it and gives it to people who have less.
Yeah.
And it basically is considered a failure because people didn't want to invest in such a coin. So we're saying about let's incentivize rich people to invest in this thing by showing them how much money gives you diminishing returns on happiness. That seems kind of hard.
Yeah.
How are you gonna? What's the plan for that?
Yeah, great question.
Acid in the water supply.
So that's a great question. The question is, how can you incentivize wealthier people, or really anybody, to self-tax themselves for good? So there's a couple different things that are happening in this space right now. The first is, if you know the site 21.co, they are doing the first stage of this, which is making it more transparent when someone donates money. So you can imagine, like a college, if you donate a ton of money to a thing, you get your name on the building. That's awesome. 21.co, on their 21.co profiles, you can see when you pay that person money, whether it's going to themselves or to a nonprofit. So that's step one of all of this, is the kind of transparency piece. And then step two of this is actually making something like a long-term coin or a do-good coin or something of that variety that you could then, when you do good, you would get back the coin in return, and then that coin would have some kind of, it would probably have no utility value, but it might be like a rare Pepe or a Dogecoin or whatever, and that is a, hey, I have a lot of do-good coins, so I was maybe good, or maybe I'd purchase it. So those are the two things that I expect to happen in this space. Yep.
Thank you for your talk, coming here. That's really cool. My name is Rodney, and I work in marginalized communities a lot. And incentivizing behavior is one of the things that I really look at, not necessarily incentivizing rich people to give, but incentivizing poor people to work. How do you expect universal basic income to incentivize that behavior, giving quality work to people?
Another great question. Boom. High fives. So the question is, how? Yeah. Libertarian meetup. Everyone. Good. So this is a great question, and this is one that a lot of people in UBI are thinking about, is worries around, if you give people money, how much does it change them from thinking from a scarce mindset to like an abundant mindset where they're going to actually go out there and do things, or will they just become lazy kind of thing? So there's not great data on this, to be honest, and actually on the Give Directly website. That's why, this pilot project that they have is going to be really intense. $30 million. They're going to give universal basic income to one community for 10 years, universal basic income to another community for 2 years on monthly cycles, universal basic income to a third community for 2 years up front, where the 2 years is all up front, a lump sum, and then one community that doesn't get universal basic income, and they're going to do randomized control trials, which is very high up on the hierarchy of evidence, in order to prove, essentially, and try to determine how this has effects on people. So I don't have an answer for you right now. I think it's very connected to the meaning piece that we asked before. But I'm really excited for this Give Directly randomized control trial to give us some data on this.
Put your mouth right next to it.
Hello.
So first of all, I want to thank you for putting your ass out on the line. And in all honest criticism, I just want to cut to one Chuck point real quick.
Be brutally.
Why the hell are people in Africa worth 1/67th what you want to pay someone in the first world? I've lived abroad in a lot of places, and I'll tell you for a fact that people in Ethiopia could take that $2,000 and do a shitload more than somebody in Chicago getting 2 G's. And if you think about the revolution of cryptocurrency, this is a major opportunity for finance. This is a major opportunity for marginalized communities, third world countries, and I don't think that aligns with what you're saying.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah. So, great question. And the question is, why should you give money? So for me, my universal basic income on my Patreon site is $1,000 a month, which is more than the $30 a month that you can give directly for a rural Kenyan. So why would you ever choose me for the $1,000 a month? And that's a great question. And that's essentially what effective altruism is a combination of saying, hey, know that we exist in this world economy where there are different purchasing power parities essentially between nations. And so really think about the money that you're going to give. And if you could give it to me, why not give that $30 a month instead to someone in rural Kenya, because it's going to have a much bigger impact. So I'm full in on what you're saying. I almost fully agree. It's a complicated system, but yes, I pretty much fully agree. I would say a second thing about it as well, which is the financial inclusion piece. I mean, some people like Coinbase and a ton of people in this space are so excited to serve the 2.5 billion unbanked people. And so as we start to push forward and as there's smartphone and then wallet adoption, hopefully we'll be able to see those people be included in these universal basic income systems.
Hi, Reese. Thank you. I really don't know much about universal basic income, but if you say you give a community uniformly the same amount of money, how does that affect inflation? Or just prices just go up and everybody stays the same, right? That's why rent in San Francisco is what it is, and everything like that.
Yes, I agree. So that's a great question. The question is, isn't universal basic income incredibly inflationary? When you give everybody a ton of money, doesn't that just make it so that what you could buy with $8 is now instead $20? And that's generally true. The thing that a lot of people in the space talk about is how technology is incredibly deflationary. So as we're experiencing this kind of exponential growth, then we are also going to experience some big deflation from the technological progress that we have here. So that is the initial answer to those questions. And the other thing that I'll say, to be honest, is there's a great article by this guy Scott Santens, who I have not read yet, that talks, it's a 25-minute article that talks exactly about this. And so I don't know that much, but I know that this guy, Albert Wenger, his primary thing is saying, hey, technology, yes, it will be moderately inflationary, but technology is incredibly deflationary, and those two things will balance out. Oops.
Thank you. This is a great thing to do. The question I had is, based on the previous comments and the Bitcoin ecosystem working in a game theoretical kind of way, we are incentivized to be selfish, right? Why will that change with this? Why isn't the pitch, do selfish things, do the same transaction much more efficiently without the nation state, right? And that's the efficiency rather than, blockchain is going to give some pie-in-the-sky dream about UBI. Tell me that my contribution will go to that rural Kenya, whoever it is, with minimal fees in lightning speed. Why is that not the pitch? Why is the virtue going to the pitch?
Yeah. So the question here is, why is it the case that I'm up here on stage not saying Bitcoin for life, or saying Bitcoin is great at doing lots of things and bringing financial inclusion to those 2.5 billion people? And the reason why I'm not saying that is because a lot of people are already saying that. So effective altruism, seriously, but effective altruism, or effective altruists think from a perspective of when they rate causes that you should work on, they first think about the scale of the problem, then they think about the amount that problem is currently not addressed by the rest of the ecosystem, and then they look at, for a given piece of work that you do in that system, how much will it actually affect the system? So this is to say, for something like this, I super agree with you that Bitcoin, and I'm very pro Bitcoin and blockchain, the whole thing. And I'm really excited for all the work that's happening in this space. And I think that right now we're not talking enough about the creative destruction externalities of the work that we're doing. And I think that that Bitcoin and blockchain will be uniquely suited to in this nation state world.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I wanted to highly recommend a podcast that Sam Harris did with William McCaskill, episode 44 for Sam Harris. They get into a really deep, thoughtful discussion, and you basically see this kid convince a very intelligent man about all the goods of effective altruism, like, over the course of 2 hours. It's very compelling, so I highly recommend that. Sam Harris, William McCaskill, episode 44.
Any final questions?
So thank you for coming out. Going back to the value-added tax,
Yeah.
would that be the consumer pays that tax? Like, would the prices vary between somebody who pays, say, a 5% tax between a 10% tax, or would it be only the business owner who pays that tax?
Yeah, so the question is about the value-added tax and who pays that tax. So the person who technically pays it in this resilience system would be the producer. However, as we know, if the producer has a higher tax on them, that money is just going to be transferred along to the consumer. So I would expect it to be the case that if I'm a company that's like, hey, I'm really into universal basic income or whatever, that I put a 20% tax on myself, and that my product is going to cost 20% more than the competitor who puts a 0% tax. So technically it's on the producer, but really likely to be the case that that cost is then pushed down to the consumer. Any other questions?